All right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. We are super glad to have you here, and we're very, very honored to have our guests. We wish we could have you here in person. We've got Alexander Glustrom, the director of the film, and Daniel Bennett, the film's producer. Hey, guys.
Hey,
Hey,
thanks
how
for
are
having
you?
us.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, I'm going to go over here and do some housekeeping. I'm going to check on our audience, make sure that we can see everything. I see there's some nice chatter in the chat. Feel free to keep talking in the chat, guys. You can connect with other viewers and have general kind of discussion. If you want to ask a question below the chat feature, there's a little button. It says "Ask a Question." That's the only way I'm going to see your questions from here on out. So if you want to ask something from Daniel and Alexander, that's where you want to put it. We've got some really great feedback. Neil's saying this film's got to be available to share. We've got to get it to more people. So we really appreciate it. And we've got some great questions. So I'm going to get to audience questions in a second. Feel free to ask more. We really appreciate having you guys here. Now, let's just start. Do you prefer Alex or Alexander? And do you want to just tell us a little bit about how this became a feature that you decided to direct, like how you decided to put in the time and get connected to the story and all that?
Sure. I was approached by an environmental rights lawyer named Monique Hardin. She's featured in the film, and she came up to me after a panel discussion for my first film, Big Charity. And she approached me after the panel, and I knew who she was because she's a really well-respected environmental rights lawyer in Louisiana. And she said, "I want to take you to this place called Mossville." And that's how it all began. I could tell by the way she said it that it was a place that held a lot of significance and power to her. And I could tell there was a story there. So I drove up a few days later and was met by a number of community members, including Daniel's parents. And at the beginning, I don't think that I saw it being a feature at first. I thought I was just going to make a short piece for Monique and some of the residents to use for activism. And then I met Stacy, and the story began to unfold. And we realized pretty quickly that it was going to be, worthy of a feature film. I met Daniel soon after, and we've been collaborating on it.
Very cool. Well, that's a perfect segue because Daniel, I understand that you are both a producer of the film and a former resident of Mossville. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Mossville. I didn't actually leave the area until I was close to 20. And I guess being a producer on the film has been very enlightening for me. So, yeah, resident and producer.
So could you tell me a little bit about that? I mean, this is a hard film for anyone to watch. I think that it's frankly unfair that anyone should have to fight so hard to tell the story of the place that they're from, like Stacy had to, and like I'm sure was part of your life growing up in this environment. Could you talk a little bit about how you decided to get involved in the project and put in the time as a producer?
Honestly, I avoided Alex for a while when Alex first came around.
Yeah.
I was trying to stay out of his way. I mean, as a creative, myself, I just kind of didn't want to interfere with whatever process he was in. And my parents kind of pushed me towards him, and I did everything I could to stay away. And it was just Alex has kind of this magnetic personality. He's just a really good person, and the people that he brought with him, they were really good people. And over time, I just kind of started talking, and then we moved into it. I became a producer because being a Mossville resident, you're accustomed to having news reporters, you're accustomed to having filmmakers all wanting to tell different stories about whatever refinery it may be in, whatever situation or spiel it might be at the time. And Alex's approach wasn't one of, "Hey, I'm here to take something." It almost seemed like just genuine curiosity, and I think that that's kind of what brought me into it, and that's really how I became a part of the team.
Wow. Well, it is a story that it's so loaded, and there's so many different ways to engage with it, so many different lines of questioning. I think I want to start with Mossville itself. Alex, I think you had a challenge on your hands where you had to resurrect something invisible by telling people what Mossville was, even after it had kind of been erased off the map. And I want to talk a little bit about the archival footage that you found, and how that came about, how you decided to bring this place to life that had been erased.
Well, on the surface, even though Mossville has been erased, it still is very much alive, and the people who are from there, whose ancestors are from there. There's not a whole lot of written documentation on Mossville. It's not the type of place that you can go and research as easily as in a library as some other places. But many of the residents have incredible photos and video from the years. Many of them treasure even painted portraits of great-grandfathers and great-grandmothers. And so there really was just a wealth of imagery that people held really dearly, but it was definitely somewhat of a scavenger hunt to try to find all those photos and get permission to use them. Daniel was a big help in tracking a lot of that stuff down.
And Daniel, did you feel like the film kind of did justice to what was by introducing people who might not be familiar with Mossville to the community that it was before the petrochemical plants took over?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my biggest fears being a producer on the film was, doing justice to the community. One of the first screenings that we did was one of the community screenings, and my fear was I'm one of the younger people of the community, and I didn't want to tell the wrong story or shed the wrong light on home. And I felt like the film has done an incredible job of actually showing what was a genuine network, a genuine community, and then showing kind of how it was picked apart and decimated. One of my favorite things is it doesn't, even though it feels bleak, it does leave a window letting people know, like, hey, there's still hope, not necessarily for Mossville, but for preventing something like this from happening again. And I think we did an excellent job at that, as humbly as I can say that.
Well, I think that is one of the challenges with the kind of environmental injustice in general is once something's gone, it's almost impossible to capture what it was unless you do that work. So kind of salute you for that. We've got some great questions here. A number from Erica George, who we're really happy to see. Erica is the director of the Tanner Humanities Center, which does really great work locally. So we're glad to have her on the feed, and they're actually sponsors of one of our programs. Erica's asking about that powerful comparison contrast with the Sasol plant in South Africa. I'm wondering how you were able to make that part of the film a reality, and Erica is wondering if you looked into any other companies that were operating in South Africa, or if you just focused on Sasol because of the link to Mossville.
Sure, good question. Well, the way we were able to make South Africa happen was, first of all, it was under Monique's encouragement, the environmental rights lawyer who first brought me to Mossville. She told me pretty early on, she was like, to tell this story right, you have to go to South Africa. And I didn't think we could really make it happen. This film was made on a shoestring budget, so sending a crew to South Africa wasn't likely at the time. We got really lucky because I happened to be shooting another film in Morocco, and after that shoot was up, I grabbed one of my good friends and the cinematographer who was out there with me, and we were able to get a flight to South Africa, because we were already in Africa, even though Morocco and South Africa are actually not that close at all, right. But a lot closer than New Orleans to South Africa. And so we were, after 30 days in Morocco, shooting a film about migrants and refugees trying to get into Spain. We jumped a plane to Dubai, then to South Africa, and we had 8 days, I think, to shoot. So it was a pretty exhaustive, just kind of whirlwind of production, trying to get as much footage as possible. And the second part of the question is, we did hear about a number of other companies that that work in South Africa or from South Africa. One of the big things that a lot of folks talked about, a lot of the South African environmental justice activists talked about, was the huge presence from Chinese companies actually in Africa. Apparently there's a big spike in Chinese oil and gas and energy companies that are building infrastructure and also railways and transport all through Africa. And Daniel actually was able to come back to South Africa when we went to go show the film for the Durban film festival, which was really cool. Maybe Daniel, you could talk a little bit about what it was like seeing the same plants on the other side of the world.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's almost necessary to say that Sasol gets a lot of talk about Sasol as a company, but it wasn't just Sasol that decimated Mossville. Sasol was the kill shot. There are several other refineries that surround Mossville and have always surrounded Mossville. Sasol was kind of just the final blow that really took out what was left of Mossville. And so that's why we hear quite a bit about it. My opportunity to go to South Africa was more than I could have ever imagined it would be. It was, I try not to be extremely emotional, but it was probably the most emotional part for me in the entire making of this film. I grew up in the house of activists. My parents are still very active activists. Not long ago, they were still at the state capitol boycotting and protesting and doing whatever they could, to make as much noise as they could. And growing up, I sat through meeting after meeting. I went to different town halls, and I heard a lot of communication about what was happening with the refineries, what spills were happening. And I didn't know a lot of what was happening. I didn't understand it. I was young, and sitting in one of the halls in South Africa, it felt as if I had closed my eyes. I would have been listening to my parents. I would have been listening to the community members. It was really jarring for me. It's probably the only time I got really teary-eyed throughout the whole process. I actually, looking at the people, while South Africans do appear to look different in some ways, it almost was if I had never left home. I was across the world, but it really felt like I was right at home. The smells were similar. The conversation was similar. Everything just, it was really mind-boggling how I could be so far away yet so closely related to these people.
Right. I mean, I think that really drives it home, because this film is haunting because it takes a specific place and it tells the plight of its story through a specific man. But under the umbrella of environmental injustice, this is happening all over the place to people who are marginalized. And I think maybe the big question is besides people like Stacy putting their bodies on the line and their families on the line for, and dying for a cause, what are some kind of bigger picture moves that people are trying to do to prevent or to remedy this kind of environmental injustice? Happy to hear from either of you on, just because I'm sure you're tracking it more than I am, but feel free to start, Alex, if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a whole host of things that people can do to get involved. I think Mossville did not have a whole lot of outside support, and had more people been willing to stand up and show up for Mossville, then more people, then it wouldn't have been as dire of a situation for people. And that doesn't just mean when Sasol came to town. I'm talking about the whole 30, 40 year history of industrialization and the poisoning of the air and the water of the people that lived there. They really were isolated from the surrounding people, and had people stood up for them, I think maybe things would have been different. I think that one of the things we encourage people to do is to get involved in your local environmental justice community organization. There's almost everywhere in the country there are fence line communities, and there are grassroots organizations being led by the people who are most affected by them. So showing up for them and listening to what they need and how you can help, not coming in and trying to rethink everything for them, but listening to them, how you can get involved, how you can be of best use. It's a great place to start. Another thing that we talk a lot about doing these during these type of discussions is the importance of putting your money where your mouth is. And that can, in an obvious way, look like donating to these organizations, donating to environmental justice organizations, donating to political campaigns that share your values for a green future. But it also can mean divesting from oil and gas companies, seeing if you're, affluent enough to have investments, seeing where that money is being invested. Oftentimes mutual funds and people without even knowing it are supporting oil and gas companies, and who you bank with. If you can pull your money out of major banks, then that can take some funds out of oil and gas pockets. And then the last thing I think is obviously vote. Vote for people, in your community and in your state that don't support oil and gas. And, I can't stress enough how important it is for us to have a change in the federal administration, no matter who it is, because the way the EPA has been ran the last 4 years is disgusting.
Gotcha. Well, we have so many questions. Daniel, you're welcome to jump in on that if you want, but I've also got some other ones I can throw your way because we've got a pretty active Q&A going here.
Yeah, sure. Let's hear the next one.
Okay, so Erica George is wondering a little bit about things from a legal perspective, and she mentions her family's from Louisiana's Cancer Alley, and she's lost many to cancer. Did any settlements ever happen that cover health care for the people of Mossville that you know of?
None that I know that are substantial. I mean, there's often class action suits, and I have lost a lot of relatives as well. In fact, I lost 3 or 4 relatives just during the making of the film, but there aren't any substantial lawsuits or legal actions that I know of. There's always, a class. In fact, I think I'm a part of at least 2 class action suits right now that are several years old. What happens though is because there are so many refineries, nobody really holds any true responsibility for any spills or anything that happens. Because it could be a mixture of whatever chemicals, and most of the healthcare professionals aren't able to pinpoint it to a specific refinery to hold anyone responsible. So the class action suits happen when there's a major spill that's undeniable, and then in that case, the plant will pay off, whatever it is, however many billion dollars, and then most of that goes to the attorney, and then it's split up between sometimes thousands or more different people who may or may not even have been involved, and the money is kind of run thin, so nobody really gets any help healthcare wise. Right.
I mean, it paints a picture of lobbying and advocacy. I love the clips you had in there of I believe it was it the governor of Louisiana?
Yeah, Bobby Jindal.
Yeah, just looking at it from an economic proposition, which is sort of a politician's default, right? Like, hey, billions of dollars of investment in our state, like, what's to argue with? And then you guys go in and you tell the human story and you show the human cost. We've got a couple questions here about how to get the film out there, because I think that's the power of it, right? Is the counter story. And Neil and Erica ask, how do we move this story forward? How do we share it? And are there any advocacy and education plans around the film in terms of its launch and release?
Yes, great question. So first of all, please find us on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. I think Facebook is where we are a bit more active. And building a community of people who are sharing stories. We really try to amplify a lot of other environmental rights organizations who are constantly posting articles and information about things happening. So Facebook is a great place to connect with us. As far as the next steps for the film, we are actually headed for our broadcast premiere on PBS on Memorial Day.
Cool.
So we'll be broadcasting nationally on PBS through their show Real South, REEL South. And then we are 90 days streaming with the 3 years broadcast with them, 90 days streaming, and then we'll go on to another streaming platform. We're also doing an educational distribution plan where we're partnering with universities and schools all around the country to show the film and incorporate it into curriculums and try to have it be an educational tool. And then we also are doing an impact strategy, which is an exciting part of the process. Maybe Daniel, you want to pick up there from the impact strategy?
Yeah, Lentoria Newton is one of she is the impact producer that we brought on board. We're visiting different fence line communities across the nation, and we're listening to their stories as well. We're sharing the film there, and we're trying to compile, as much information as we can, so that, because I believe one of the ultimate goals is to get clean air and clean water for everyone. And so the impact, what we're hoping for is just that, we want somebody to be shaken up. We want someone to be stirred to feel like they're going to make a difference. And I mean, we live in the age of social media. We live right now, as unfortunate as it is, many of us don't have much to do right now. So tell a friend to watch it, tell somebody about it. And I think that's one of the best ways to really get it out there. Share it on social media. Tell somebody who doesn't know. I'm big about not preaching to the choir. Tell somebody who really doesn't care at all, so that they can really be jarred by what they see. Because I think what's really different about Mossville, this film, is you're not looking at talking heads. You're not looking at people, just kind of sitting and preaching at you. You're literally watching somebody die on screen in front of you.
Right.
And that's not something that you see every day. It's not something that any human being with a heart can just watch and feel nothing about. And I think it's important to just tell people who don't necessarily have any emotions about petrochemical refinery, people who don't really have that deep emotional tie to environmental activism. I think it's really important for us to just tell somebody.
That you bring up some really great steps. Somebody asked what the Instagram handle was for the film, or for some of those efforts, if you guys know off the top of your head.
Mossville Film.
Mossville Film. That's a good one. Good grab.
Easy.
Easy to remember. Now, I have a sort of, I don't know, like, you could say it's a devil's advocate question. It's sort of an asshole question, but I want to see where you take it. I'm thinking about just the true cost of these things, because we live in this industrialized world, and we all are complicit in that, in our consumer patterns. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how, and this goes back to what you were saying, Daniel, about this is a great time to share the film, because I think a lot of people are realizing during the pandemic that inequality and the impacts of inequality, mean that different people are affected disproportionately by the problems of society. So a place like Mossville, because of institutional racism and historic racism, is affected by our impact on the environment disproportionately than my predominantly white community in Salt Lake, for example. So if you have somebody saying, oh, well, we need refineries and we need petrochemicals, they've got to be somewhere, like, it only displaced a handful of people. Like, I know that is a reaction rooted in racism and ignorance, but I'm wondering, like, what you would say to that perspective.
First thing I would say, go ahead.
No, you go.
I mean, the first thing I would say is, while it only uprooted a handful of people, what if it was your people?
Right.
What if it was your family? Just the human aspect. Would you be comfortable if your grandmother lived there? Would you be comfortable if your kids played at those parks? So if you want to let that deep-seated racism, have its place, then by all means, just be comfortable with knowing that that's what you're doing. Yeah. Don't shy away from it. But I think that's one of the big things. I am a big guy. I don't know if you guys can see here on the screen, but I cannot live without air conditioning. And Freon is not organic. But I let people know, that I personally am not one of those people who is like, destroy every petrochemical plant and just shut it all down. I know that there are some things that we need. I like my seat cushions, but I think that the way we consume these products is going to be way more important than the fact that they're here. They only produce so much because of our overconsumption. If we be mindful about the things that we do, then we can help, eliminate that. Recycling is important. My dad's a big recycler, turning off the air, turning off the AC, just being mindful about the small things. If everybody just did one or two small things, that's going to put a major dent in it, It's just being mindful about overconsumption, in my opinion.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If I would just add to that, I would just say that, like exactly what Daniel said, that we're definitely not on, thinking that every single plant in the world should just be shut down. I think both Daniel and I live in the real world and understand the realistic needs for oil and gas and use them ourselves, obviously. But I still don't think that means that the oil and gas companies just get free reign to do whatever they want. Like, you can't just because we use some of these things doesn't mean that they don't need to be checked. And there in Louisiana, if you drive from New Orleans, where I live, to Lake Charles, where Daniel lived, really all the way to Houston, New Orleans to Houston, it is just, industrial plant after industrial plant. It's become an apocalyptic wasteland. And I think if you live in a place where you don't see what that actually looks like, it's very easy to say out of sight, out of mind. And we need those things. I want to keep, living my life the way that I live, and I don't care because I don't ever go to Louisiana. But there are real people who are dealing with the costs of this. And obviously, I don't think I need to even go into the greater human cost and planetary cost of climate change. I think when you recognize that we do need to be moving away from oil and gas, the idea of building new oil and gas infrastructure in this moment feels idiotic to me. It feels like it totally lacks foresight. So I don't think we're saying shut every plant down, but when you watch this plant be built, where Daniel's people come from, and this is the most amount of steel I've ever seen in my life. I filmed the whole construction project, everything they brought into this plant. It's going to be there forever. And to think of building such a massive oil and gas infrastructure project at a time where we need to be moving away from fossil fuels, it just feels like it totally lacks insight and foresight.
We don't have to have the petrochemical refineries. We don't have to have them. There are other outlets. What keeps them around is dollars and cents. If we're just completely honest, there's solar power, there's, kinetic power. There's so many different ways to produce energy, but what keeps them around is they're bigwigs who are making billions of dollars off of it, and they don't want it to go anywhere.
Right.
And once we really recognize that the longer we allow this, eventually it's going to affect you whether you're close to it or not. There's only so much that you can pollute a place before it starts to really bother us all. We only have, the water is separated, but we only have one, water source, and it comes from the earth. The air is all the same air, whether you're here or there, it's all the same ozone, and over time, it's going to affect us all, whether it be our generation or the next after. Eventually, we're going to pay the cost for allowing it to go so far.
Right.
And if I could just add one last thing, that even if you are of the belief that we need all oil and gas industry, we still should be fighting for a more equitable society. So it shouldn't be where non-white communities bear the burdens of that energy production at an unequal amount to white communities. Right. So even beyond the discussion of fossil fuels versus green energy, while we are still on the fossil fuel train, we have to create a society that is more equitable. And that means that it shouldn't be because you're black, you have less access to clean air and clean water than a white person. Mm-hmm. That's environmental racism. And so no matter what you believe on the oil and gas discussion, that needs to change.
Right. And I don't think it's an accident that a formerly free town of Mossville gets essentially an attempt to erase like that history and that culture. Like that is steeped in a lack of understanding about the significance of slavery in this country and of racism in this country. I think here in Utah we have parallels with what happens on our Native American reservations, where it's kind of out of sight, out of mind to the majority of the population. But it's not an accident that that's where the most significant developments occur. And we have a question here. You talked a little bit about class action lawsuits. There's also the other perspective of litigation, which is sort of accountability in some kind of non-economic court, like a human rights court. Erica George asked, lawyers petitioned at the Inter-American Court. Do you know any status of any litigation that benefited Mossville on a non-class action level?
Yeah, that's shout out to Monique again. That she's the one who's heading up that lawsuit. Although if it's the same one I'm thinking of, I'm not sure if it actually. I think it's connected to the UN, and I'm not sure how much actual control it has over making significant change to the oil and gas industry in Louisiana. I know it's a very significant. It symbolizes a lot. I'm not sure of any specific implications that could come from that. I know it's still being fought at this moment, so I guess we're waiting to see. One thing in regards to class action lawsuits that I just wanted to throw in there is one of the things that these companies do is they do this buyout system. It's very slick the way that they do it. There will be a massive spill in the 90s. There was a leak from a pipe. For 6 months, this pipe was leaking ethylene dichloride into the ground, and it contaminated the groundwater where Mossville folks had wells, and they ingested this water. So anyway, what they do when one of these spills takes place, the company at fault, they won't admit fault, but what they will do is they will start offering to buy out residents. And so they'll come to you and they'll say, oh, your water is poisoned. Here, we'll give you some money so you can leave. We're your friend. They are the ones who are responsible for poisoning the water. They don't acknowledge that. But what they do is when you sign to take the money for the buyout, you also sign away any rights to sue for any health-related things that may come from anything that happened while living there. That's what happened with Stacy's parents. That's what happened with many, many Mossville residents that I've talked to. Every Mossville resident who's taken that buyout offer has had to relinquish rights to sue. So that's one of the ways that they get around these lawsuits. And the other thing is that it's hard to find lawyers in Lake Charles that will represent anybody going against these plants. I mean, it's hard to, I didn't truly recognize how much power these plants have in that part of Louisiana, all over Louisiana, but really specifically near Lake Charles and all the way near to Baton Rouge. And so it's hard to find a lawyer to go up against, these plants have huge legal teams, and you're going to go find, some like independent lawyer to go up against them. And some, like Philo, who we interviewed in the film, he's a courageous fighter and he's going after them, but it's very hard to find those lawyers who can really have successful lawsuits against the plant.
Well, I think we're wrapping down on questions a little bit, but I really appreciate your time, and I'm wondering, the film obviously has a subtitle from a Maya Angelou poem, and one of the benefits of streaming events, instead of doing things live, is I was able to read the poem while we were watching the film, and it's quite, it's a poem about grief and loss, but it's quite redemptive in the last couple lines. There is this hope. And I'm wondering, maybe Daniel, if you have any sort of thoughts of just the resilience involved in this. As an organization that plays documentaries, I hate when every documentary about a black community is about the grievous injustices enacted upon it. And I'm wondering where your filmmaking's taking you and what your perspective is, where you're carving your way in this world, any kind of silver lining you want to leave us with. You don't have to, but I'm just seeing if it's out there.
Silver lining is, you watched it. All of you watched it, and to me that is the silver lining. You know about it, you heard about it, and hopefully it is, it's festering in your spirit and it's telling you that I can't let this happen again. And while this deep-seated racism may exist, I'm going to do my part to eliminate it. That's a silver lining to me. One of the first things, I think one of my first pieces of input on this film was, I don't want this to seem as though Mossville cowered out. I didn't want it to seem like this wasn't, like Mossville was this, oh, woe is me kind of town. I wanted it to be kind of a redemptive story. And I think that's part of why, the poem was brought into play, because I didn't want it to be like, hey, this town completely failed. No, I think that Mossville has done a very courageous part. I think that, for lack of a better way to say it, Mossville has been a martyr for, so many different fence line communities and so many people, just around the world. We have suffered through some pretty big travesties. We've dealt with health issues. And Stacy made me promise to remind people that people have died and people are dying, and the rest of the community told me to let you know that they're still fighting. It may seem like Mossville is completely off of the map, but there are still some families that are in Mossville that are still fighting, that still want to see a difference. And maybe not just from Mossville, but I've been to San Francisco. There are communities in San Francisco. I've been to Portland. Portland deals with their issues. We've been to Port Salford near New Orleans. They're dealing with issues. So it's a one big fight. So I think the silver lining is, people know about it. People are making noise about it. I've not seen a bigger, one thing that really kind of caught me off guard is there was a film, a blockbuster film in theaters about the refineries, and a guy who was going up against the refineries, and I'd never seen anything like that before. And call it call it what you may, but I'd like to think that Mossville had something to do with that, you know. And I think that's one of the silver linings for me. You know, I learned a lot through this. I mean, I didn't know just how much I didn't know. You know, there were some things that were happening in Mossville that I thought were completely normal. I didn't know just how abnormal it really was, and so I think there's more silver lining than I would even know to tell you. You know, so it's not a sad story as long as there's a difference that's made. You know, as long as we don't allow, you know, my aunt, my uncle, you know, Stacy's mom and dad, and everybody who's lost family in Mossville to go in vain, that's more silver lining than we could ask for. As long as their deaths are not just for nothing, you know, we'll be good.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, I want to hear, Alex, I want to hear your thoughts on that as well. But Daniel, before we let you go, what are you up to? Are you working on the outreach on this film? Are you continuing to do film projects, or where are you headed?
Photography is mostly what I do. Film, I've got a few fiction projects that I'm working on, and hopefully when Alex starts the next one, he calls me back. Creative. I just love the arts. You know, I don't necessarily have anything big on the horizon, but I'm looking forward to whatever comes next. I mean, I know I'll be there with my parents whenever they go to the next event. You know, I'm not gonna forget about any of this. Mossville is still home. I'm only 10, 15 minutes away from Mossville. I haven't really left. You know, so yeah, that's I guess that's what's next.
Cool. Alex, what's going on in your world?
I mean, I can't say it any better than what Daniel was saying about, you know, the ways that just the fact that you guys are watching this film is a huge victory. That so many people are watching it. That so many people know Stacy's story, and the reason we chose that poem, you know, obviously in addition to the reference to the trees, which is a symbol and a real part of the film, is the last lines of it where it says, "We can be better because they existed." And that's it. We hope that we can all be better and live better lives because Mossville existed, because this film existed, because people know the story. So that is a huge victory for us. And as far as what I'm up to now, I'm just like most people, I'm, you know, staying locked down, waiting for this to end. I don't have any big film projects on the horizon. I think I do a lot of freelance journalism, so I'm going to continue to shoot for. I do work for New York Times and CNN on occasion, and so I think I'm going to continue doing freelance journalism, try to do some commercial work for a little while, and I've never really gone out searching for documentary films, so this is my second one, and they both kind of came to me in weird ways, and so I don't really have any plans on going for searching one, but if one finds me, then I'm open to it, and I'm going to hit you up, Daniel.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Do it. Well, thanks so much for your time, guys. If you know, I'd love to hear what how Stacy's doing, and especially how's his son doing. If they're still living in Texas, and if he's glad for his decision to ultimately leave. I know that's bittersweet.
Stacy never made it to Texas.
Oh, he didn't make it out? Shows what
Never made it to Texas. Stacy is still trying to get to Texas. Stacy's health is. It's not. I wouldn't say it's better, but I guess you'd say it's plateauing. I don't know what the right word is. I had the opportunity to sit with Stacy not long ago, and his feet are still swelling. He's still going through some things. But I've never seen a better relationship between father and son. They are happy. They are always happy. They stay together. Andre's really into roller coasters, which is thrilling to me. I'm not a thrill seeker at all. But yeah, they spend a lot of happy time together. So I think Stacy is the same resilient Stacy that you met on the film. I don't think Stacy's giving up the fight at all. You know, but yeah, he never really made it to Texas. That's one of his goals. He's still trying to get to Texas. He's open to, you know, opportunities there, but he's doing. I don't want to say he's doing good, but I also don't want to give a negative aspect. He's doing.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it'd be a lot to expect a miraculous recovery after a life of what he went through, you know.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, you guys. Really appreciate your time. Looking forward to what you get up to next. And I think the takeaway for the audience is, if you're impacted by this, follow the film, get it out there. It's part of a whole, and I think we can learn a lot from what you brought us. So thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us the time and showing the film.
Absolutely. Have a good night, y'all.
The Facebook page, yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Daniel. So go to the Facebook page, get connected there.
Yeah, get connected on the Facebook page, the Instagram, Google Mossville in general. There's a lot of stuff about Mossville, but like I said, share, make sure that you tell somebody. I think that's the key, not just because of the film, but just because of the message, so I think that's the key. And I want to thank y'all from the bottom of my heart, because as a Mossville resident, like, this obviously is closer to home for me than probably anybody else. So thanks again.